We hope you've enjoyed Run Silent, Run Deep. Now stay tuned for Tim Malloy and Wendy Rutledge on News 13 at 10. It's the right news at the right time. Channel 13, KCOP, Los Angeles. Los Angeles, Tim Malloy, Wendy Rutledge, Mike Chamberlain, Judy Jernad. This is News 13.
It was a 60s-style protest concerning the geographical flashpoints of the 80s. More than 1,000 demonstrators were bused to a heavily wooded office complex in Langley, Virginia, the headquarters of the CIA.
No more CIA! No more CIA!
It was very well organized. 1,000 demonstrators, some veterans of the combative Vietnam-era protests, some much younger, were bused to Langley at dawn.
We're probably more patriotic than the CIA.
I'm moving ahead with other people to face another historical situation.
When the buses arrived at CIA headquarters, more than 250 sheriff's deputies wearing riot gear were waiting. But the goal of the demonstrators was not violence, rather to slow the flow of CIA workers into the complex and criticize the agency's actions in Nicaragua and South Africa. Among the voices, that of a former CIA analyst who played a dominant role in 60s activism.
My bottom line goal is to head off an invasion of Nicaragua by demonstrating to this president and Congress and the people in this building that if they choose to do that, if the president chooses to do that to save himself from impeachment or from the failure of his present policy in Nicaragua, he will have to arrest thousands and tens of thousands of Americans protesting that action. I think that may warn him off.
400 of the 1,000 demonstrators were arrested, and there was no violence.
We're here, we're peaceful, and we've made our point.
The demonstrators, made up of members of labor, business, and church organizations, managed to block the main entrance for a couple of hours. Those CIA personnel seemed to take the inconvenience in stride. There were similar, smaller protests in other American cities, including L.A. A local group was allowed to demonstrate outside of the federal building here. 8 people were allowed to the 8th floor where they believed the CIA offices were. They knocked, they were not let in. An hour later, they left.
Former CIA Director William Casey is believed to be still in critical condition tonight, suffering from pneumonia. 74-year-old Casey resigned his post last February after undergoing treatment for a brain tumor. He was admitted to a New York hospital over the weekend, but his family today imposed a news blackout on condition updates. Casey is considered to be a major figure in the Iran-Contra scandal. Also tonight, Lawrence Walsh, the independent investigator looking into the Iran arms scandal, has confirmed reports that Oklahoma City law firm once represented an airline owned by the CIA. But Walsh says that Southern Air Transport's link to the law firm does not pose a conflict of interest because it was not a long-term client. Southern Air reportedly flew arms to Iran. Back here at home, the long-running battle over oil drilling off the California coast hit a fever pitch today. The federal government announced plans to lease tracts of California's continental shelf to oil companies for exploration. The leases would be sold over the next 5 years. Interior Secretary Donald Hodel says the drilling is necessary for America's energy independence. Senator Pete Wilson says stopping it is necessary to save California's coast.
As it is, California, I think, cannot accept this plan. It simply permits leasing too near to shore. The danger to us as a result in terms of our air quality being deteriorated and the danger from possible spills is just too great.
Oil companies have endorsed the drilling. Most environmentalists oppose it. The lease plan has the force of law unless Congress changes it, that is in the next 60 days. And there are moves underway on Capitol Hill to do just that. Under the current plan, Santa Monica, San Clemente, Newport, and Long Beach, along with Catalina, would escape the drilling.
President Reagan is trying to calm the stormy trade dispute with Japan just days before a visit by Prime Minister Nakasone. In a speech to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the president said sanctions must stop and markets must open up on both sides of the Pacific. He then attacked a trade reform bill now pending in Congress, calling it protectionist and dangerous.
Legislation before the House of Representatives would make us use a steamroller against unfair practices every time, no matter whether the steamroller would open the trade doors or flatten the entire house.
The president said he didn't want to impose sanctions on Japanese goods and hopes that the ones he has slapped on those products can be lifted soon.
The United States will not be opening its doors to Austrian President Kurt Waldheim. Today, the Justice Department branded him a suspected Nazi war criminal, barred him from entering this country. Greg Cunningham now has more on the Waldheim decision and the reaction that followed it.
The decision to keep Kurt Waldheim out of the United States was a victory for the World Jewish Congress, which uncovered most of the evidence of Waldheim's hidden Nazi past.
In the eyes of the world, his Nazi past has been exposed. Nothing can bring back the victims of the Holocaust, but we have an obligation to set the historical record clear. It has now in the case of Kurt Waldheim. The truth has emerged.
The Justice Department said Waldheim was being denied entry to this country as an individual, not as the president of Austria.
This determination was based on United States law that prohibits entry to any foreign national who assisted or otherwise participated in activities amounting to persecution during World War II.
President Reagan called in the Austrian ambassador, Thomas Klestel, to personally tell him of the decision. A short time later, the Austrian government angrily rejected the U.S. move and called its ambassador home for consultation. Foreign Minister Dr. Alois Mock said the Waldheim ban causes Austria deep dismay. And there were hints that Austrian Chancellor Franz Vranitzky may cancel an official visit to the U.S. next month. The State Department stressed that the action against Waldheim was not intended as an insult to the Austrian people.
We share a fundamental commitment to democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. We value our relationship with Austria highly and will work to strengthen our friendship.
The American Jewish Committee said the Austrians can't face up to their own history.
The saddest thing about the whole situation is it tells us that Austria, which in some respects has to be considered a genuine democracy and has been not a bad friend of America in many ways, nevertheless has never itself really faced up to its past of its cooperation with Nazi Germany.
There are loopholes in the law that would allow Waldheim to come here as a diplomat, perhaps as part of a UN delegation. But with or without a visa, it's doubtful that Waldheim will ever set foot on these shores again. For one thing, he's not been invited. There are no plans to invite him, and common sense would dictate that the Austrian president not invite himself. In Washington, this is Barry Cunningham.
Now here in the Southland, a noted Jewish group has applauded the administration's decision. Rabbi Marvin Heyer, dean of the Simon Wiesenthal Center, says that Waldheim should not be treated any differently than convicted war criminals.
But I'm delighted that the State Department and the Justice Department concurred when they reviewed the facts. And I think there's a message in this for all suspected Nazi war criminals around the world, that even 45 years after the crime, or 42 years after the crimes, they should not be complacent about their freedom.
Heyer says this decision could in fact be devastating for Waldheim. The rabbi says it could make Waldheim ineffective as the leader of his country, force his resignation.